Okay, so in the last two videos, we worked on getting some data here, and we actually sent some post requests. And when we're sending these post requests, remember that we need to send in a token. So we have some protected routes here. So in this video, what I want to do is build in a login form. So when you log in, we are going to get a token stored right here inside of local storage. So this is completely up to you and how you want to do this. In this case, on login, the token is going to be stored here. And once that token is stored, you can actually vote here. Otherwise, your request will be blocked. So right now we have no token, and we're just going to keep getting this response here. So if I go to, let's see, we can go into network here. So if I refresh it, as we vote, we're going to see that all these requests are being blocked. So we see that red right there, and it's basically saying that we're not allowed to go here. So let's go ahead and actually make this dynamic. Once we do that, I'm actually going to add in some logout functionality. So we're going to have a logout button. And all that button's going to do is simply delete that token. So let's go ahead and go back to our front end. Remember, make sure your server is on. So we are still working with this API. So let's go ahead and make that template here. So we'll go in here, we'll close out. Actually, we'll leave all these open. So in here, we have main.css, main.js, and in here, what I want to do is create a login.html, and then we won't focus on the styling. And I'll also create a login.js. Now the styling we'll put into CSS, but we're not going to do too much. So in login.html, let's go ahead and get that HTML boilerplate. So make sure you have your HTML tags, your head tag, body, everything in here. We are connecting to login.js now. So that's in the same file structure, but we're still going to be connecting to main.css. So this is our login page. So let's go ahead and actually build out the contents here. So inside of the body, we're going to create a div here. And this div is going to be, we're going to give it the ID of form-wrapper. So form wrapper, we want to store the form in here. Then in here, let's just do h1. We'll just say login. So we're not going to focus on making it look fancy. We'll create an HR tag. And in the HR tag, we're going to create a form here. Now, with this submission, we are not going to be doing things like we did with Django before, because this has nothing to do with our Django application. What the user uses on the front end is completely up to them. So we're not going to request a CSRF token or anything like that. We won't even specify the post method in here or the method types. So we're not adding anything in here. There's no CSRF token. So at this point, all I'm going to do is add in an ID to the form. So we'll just do login -form, and that's it. So this is not a Django application anymore. It's simply an HTML file that uses some JavaScript. So I just want to make that clear that we're separate from the user that's actually building the front end here. So let's create a label here. We'll just do user name, and let's create that input field now. So we'll do input, close that up here, and we're going to set the type here. So the type is going to be text. Then I want to set the name. So what are we working with? So what's the name here? In this case, it's going to be user name, and this is how we can access that attribute. And let's just copy these two, paste this below, and let's just add in password. So we want a username and password. So in here, we'll just set password, and the name here is going to be password. Okay, so we have a form here. We can also add in a submit button. So let's just create another input field here. Close that up here. Type will be submit. And then the actual value, so this is the text of the button. This is going to say login. Okay, so we have a simple button here. What I want to do is take this login script right here, copy that, remove it, and put it down underneath the body. So I've heard that it actually works up here now, but ever since I've been using JavaScript, I've always put it at the bottom, and there's reasons for that. So unless it changed, I'm going to keep it down here, and I'll read up on that later. But this is the safe bet at this point. So we have login.js, so we connected that, and we have our form. So let's go ahead and open up this page here. So I'm going to go into my files here. So we'll just move all that out of the way, and we'll go into login HTML. So now we have this page and a login page with a simple form. So I just want to add in some really quick styling here. So we'll go into main.css. And I need to take this form wrapper here. So at the bottom of the page, let's go ahead and add that. And that was an ID here. So we'll do form wrapper. and we'll just style that. So in this case, for the form wrapper, we'll just do max width 600 pixels. And then I want to add in some styling to the actual card. So what I'm going to do here is take this project wrapper, and let's just take all of this actually. So I just want to make sure that it has a white background and that it's centered. So we'll copy that, and that's form wrapper. So if I refresh this, there we go. So that looks decent. Let's actually add some padding here. So we'll just do padding and 2EM. So I don't like how the form is touching the border here. So this right here, we'll fix that, and there we go. So there is our awesome login form. So now we need to add in some actions when this form is submitted. So what we're going to do here is whenever a user submits this form with JavaScript, we are going to send a post request to this route here. So at this point, we have this interface, and then when we submit this, or when we submit this post request, we get back this response. So we need to replicate what's happening here. So anytime a user goes to our domain /API users and token, if it's a post request with the correct username and password. So remember, we actually did this in Postman. So users token, I remove my password here, but when we send this password, if everything is correct, we should get back a token. So we're going to take that token. Let's close this out. We'll go back into login. So we're going to take that token with JavaScript, and we're going to go into our application storage, and in local storage, we're going to set that token here. Then we will be redirected to this page. Once that token is set, a user can now vote. So that's what the action is going to look like. So let's go ahead and complete that. So we'll go into login.js here. So this is where we want to handle all that logic here. So the first thing I want to do is get this login form. So I added an ID here. So we want to query this or use a query selector, and we'll just get the form. So we'll just do form, and this is going to be document.getElement by ID. And we're just going to take that login form. So, whoops, I thought I had it copied. So we'll just do login-form. So that's the ID of the form. And now I want to add in an event handler. So the event handler at this point, or the event listener, so add event listener. In this case, it's going to be submit. So when this form is submitted, we need to do a few things here. So by default, when a form is submitted, we typically send some kind of request and the page is refreshed here. So in this case, we're going to create a function here, and we're going to use an arrow function. The first thing I want to do is prevent the default action of a form. So in this case, we're going to take that event, so E right here, and we're just going to do prevent default. So I'll just show you what's going to happen here just to clear this up here. So console.log, and we'll just say form was submitted. Okay, so we added the event listener. So at this point, all we're doing is consoling this out. So if I go ahead and refresh this, we'll do inspect. If I go to console, we'll fill out some fields here. If I hit submit, the form was submitted, but notice the page does not refresh. So we're not seeing that refresh. So if I leave this out here, if I don't do prevent default, by default, the form's action is to submit some information. So now we're seeing the page refresh. So you kind of see it in a flash here, and then the console goes away. So we don't want the page to refresh because now we can't perform the other actions. So that's why we're doing e.prevent default. So once we prevent that default action, we're saying that we want to handle everything ourselves now. So in this case, let's go ahead and get that form data. So we'll do form data, and we want to pull out all the information out of the form to send this to the backend. So I'm just going to create an object here, and we're going to go into form.username, so we can actually access each attribute of a form, and we're going to pull out the value. So that's going to be the username. So we access the form here, and we're getting these values by their name. So whatever you named it, you can get those values. And there's different ways to do it. Some people just take the entire form object and snapshot that, but I just want to pull these out individually. So for the password, we'll just do form, not in a string here, form.password.value. So in this case, let's go ahead and console this out. So we're going to do console.log, and let's just do form data, and let's just console out the form data. So we'll do form data like that, and there we go. So if I refresh this now, let's go ahead and just add in some information. So I'm going to do Dennis Ivy, and I'm just going to do password or something like that. So I'll add in a random password. So if I refresh that, now we see the form data, we see this object. So this is replicating what we're doing here. So we got that object, and what was next here? So we need to send a post request. Remember, when we click this, we set the post method. This was sent, and we got back a token. So now we want to send this. So to send it, let's go ahead and continue here. So I'm going to remove the console. So I don't want you to see my dummy password here. And let's go ahead and use the fetch API. So we'll just do fetch here. We need to add in a URL. So what was the URL here? In this case, we'll go back to Postman, and that was the root domain API users token. So I'll actually just go to this one here. So we're just going to take that. So let's bring that in here in the fetch API. Wow, I stuttered there. So in the fetch API, we're sending that request, and because this is a post method, we need to add in some information. So we're going to do method. The method is going to be post. We'll add that in right there. And I forgot this last time, so we're going to need to do headers like that. And then that's also going to be an object. So in this case, what kind of data are we sending? So I'll go into project list here, or main.js, and let's just take this right here. So the content type application JSON. So we're pasting that in. Once we set the content type, we're not sending a token on this request, so we don't need the second part. We're doing this to receive a token. So we have the headers, we'll add in another comma, and what's the body here? So this is the body, so the actual data that we're sending, and we need to make sure it's a string, so we'll do json.stringify, and let's just pass in the form data here. So we're gonna take in this form data, and we're passing that in. So this object right here is going to be sent to the backend to this URL with a post request. So we'll add in our promise. So we'll just go ahead and do .then, and we'll just do response. And this is going to be response.json. So we're going to convert that into JSON data. Then we'll add in another response here, .then, and we're just going to do data, arrow function. And let's go ahead and console out our response. So we'll just do console.log, and this will just be data. Okay, so let's see if everything's working. So on the form submission, we fill out this form. We added an event listener that listens to this form itself. When we submit it, we take the data, we send this data to this URL, we pass that data into the body, and then we want the response. So I think this is all we need at this point. So let's go ahead and check this out. So if I go ahead and go to the front end, so I want to type in my real username and password. So Dennis Ivy for the demo account, type in a real password. So the same thing that we're doing in here. So if I send that, there we go. So everything was good. We get back the access and the refresh token. So the same thing that we get back right here. So now we have this data. At this point, we didn't set anything, so we're still technically not logged in. If I send in the wrong username, we're going to get back this response here that says no active account with these credentials. So once we send in real information, we just receive a token. So the next thing I want to do is set this token inside of local storage, and I open up the wrong one here. So I want to set the token inside of local storage and then redirect the user to the projects list page. So in here, we have an object here, and we can access the .access token. So this token right here that we got in the response, we can access this one right here. This is the one we need at this point. So let's go ahead and get that token and set it. So once we got that token, let's go ahead and check that we got it. So we'll just do if, and we're going to write a condition. So if data.access. So if we got back the token, then let's go ahead and set it. So if we got the token, we'll just do local storage dot set item. So earlier on we used get item. Now we can set it, and at this point we just set the name of it. So what do we want to name it? We'll call it token, and we'll just do data dot access, and that's it. So we're going to set the item, and then we want to redirect a user. So we're going to do window dot location. So we're just going to send the user to the next page, and this is going to be set to this file path, and I think I could set it this way. So we want to send the user here. So whatever you're using, just take that file path, copy this, and I think it'll work like this if I just add that as a string. So in this case, I also want to add in an else condition, and I'll just say alert, not in a string. So alert, and we'll just say username or password. did not work. Okay, so let's see what happens here. So if I go ahead and refresh this, let's first test an error. So I'm going to refresh that. Let's add in some random information. It doesn't do anything. So if I add in real information, and we'll just do my password here. If I hit login, now we're redirected and we're logged in. So what's happening here? So at this point, if I go into application, we just set this token. So in theory, to log out a user, all we do is delete it, and that's it. So we'll go back to the last page here, and let's try that again. So let's see how this works. So if I do Dennis Ivy, type in my password, hit login, we're redirected, and the token was set. So that's all we needed to do here. So what I want to do now is first I want to make sure that this is working. So if I go ahead and vote, I can downvote. So everything's working. If I delete the token, it will not work. So I just want to reiterate this, make sure that you understand it. So if I remove that, now the votes are not working. So we're going to see these errors, and yeah, we're seeing that right here. So it's still in a success response, but it's not working. So if I log in, then it works. So what I want to do now is actually add in a log out button. So now I'm logged in, the token is set. So it's up here, and we're not going to make this fancy. So if a user is logged in, they're still going to be able to be here. They just can't vote, but they can view the data. And we could add in a condition that says, like, if you're not logged in, you can't vote, and that's it. But we're not going to worry about that. That's outside of the scope that we're dealing with. So what I want to do is go to the main page here, and I want to change the buttons that we're going to output in the front end. So in project list, let's go ahead and add these buttons. So I'm going to add in a new section. So we'll just do section. And let's just add 2 buttons. So the first thing is we'll add in a link here, and this one is going to be, let's see, we'll just call this logout. And for the actual href value, well, we're not going to do anything, so we'll leave that as an empty string. We're just going to trigger an action with JavaScript. So I need to add in an ID, and this is going to be logout button. So we're going to add in an event handler that is going to delete that token and then redirect our user. So once we have this, we also want to add in a login button, and in this case, we're going to send the user to login-html. So that is actually going to send a user somewhere. So in this case, this is going to be login btn, and we'll set this to login. So at this point, we have 2 buttons here. So if I refresh this, 2 buttons up here, doesn't really look good, but now we can go into main.js. So this is the JavaScript file that we're working with in that login page or the projects page. And we just want to get both buttons. So we'll just do let, and we'll just do login btn. And we're going to use the query selector. So document.get element by ID. And this will be login-btn. That's what I called it here. So login btn and then log out btn. So let's get both of these. Copy this. This will be log out and log out here. Okay, so we get both buttons, and I just want to add in a condition here that removes one or the other. So if we're logged in, we want the log out button to show, and if we're logged out, we want the log in button to show. So the first thing I want to do is get the token. So we'll just do token, and I'm just going to copy this right here. So we actually get the token from the front end here. So let's just copy this. So we'll set another variable. And in this case, this is going to be on load. We're going to access the token. And we're just going to create a condition. So if token, so we want to know if we have a token. So if we have one, let's go ahead and do login button. So we don't need a login if we are logged in. So if we have a token, we'll just do login button dot remove. And that's it. And then we'll just do else, and we'll do log out button dot remove. So if we're logged in, we see the log out button, and if we're logged out, we see the log in button. Okay, so let's go ahead and refresh that, or save it and refresh it, and now we will only see one button. So I want to do something when the log out button is clicked. So in this case, let's go ahead and add in a function here, or an event handler, and we're going to add this to the log in button or the log out button. So we'll paste that in here, and then we'll do add event listener, and this is going to be on click. And because that's a link, I want to prevent the default action, so we'll pass in the event, use an arrow function, and let's just go ahead and do e.prevent default. So it's not going to try to send the user somewhere, and then we'll just do local storage dot remove item. So we'll just do remove item. And in this case, we tell it what item we want to remove from local storage. And that's going to be the token. Now, once we get the token, we're just going to do window. So window.location. So window is like our browser. We'll just do location. And then that's going to be set to the login page. So in this case, let's go into the login page. Here, let's just take these values here. Let's remove them. And let's just copy all of that. And let's paste this down here. So as a string, just like we did with the login page, we redirect a user back to the login page. So now let's test this. So I'm going to go ahead and inspect element. And at this point, I think we're logged in. So we'll just do projects-list. So later on, you'd probably add some functionality like if a user's logged in, they can't be in the home page, kind of like what we did with our full application. But again, that's outside of the scope. So at this point, we're logged in, right? We see the token. I can upvote. We change the vote, and I can downvote. So we're actually seeing things work. We're sending the request. So if we go to performance, or not performance, but network, we can see all these requests being made. So we can see that down here. Now, if I want to log out, let's go into application, and we see this token. So if I hit log out, that token was deleted, and we are redirected. Now I can log in, and we've seen this, so this is nothing new. So we log in, tokens there, and so on. So that's it. So we can log in, log out. We're setting the token on each request. And that's it for the API section. So I wanted to show you how to set up a simple API and how to work with this in the front end. Now, again, in a real application, you would probably have your JavaScript set up a little bit better. At this point, we kind of set up a very rough application, but this is where either setting up your JavaScript better or having a front end framework would work really good. But these two applications don't even need to touch each other. They don't need to know about each other. All we're doing is sending requests, getting data, and interacting with each other. So I hope that this front end section helped. I know we kind of got stuck on JavaScript and styling there. It might have dragged it on a little bit, but it should give you an idea of how to work with this. So let's go ahead and move on to the next section now.